someone just send her that just to record.
Y'all got this one figured out yet? Yeah, we can figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, coming from here, they wanted to play on the TVs, but coming from the cleaner, they played on their own. So
You get it in. You get it in.
is Sarah Sinatra. I am with SNME. I'm with a firm that was hired by the county to lead your update process for your comprehensive plan and your land development regulations. Before we start, I just wanted to confirm online, we have a number of participants through Zoom and someone else from my office. So I just want to confirm, Jaleesa, can you confirm that you can hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. It's
Okay,
very clear.
perfect. Great, thank you. Also, with me is Denise Garbowsky, and she can introduce herself. She's on our team also.
Hi, I'll step out of the penalty box. My name is Denise Garbowsky. I'm working with Sarah on this project. I have an urban planning consulting firm called Svcs based in Savannah, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Pass it to the county to say hello.
Teresa Concanon, I'm the planning and zoning manager here.
Brad Clement, Director of Development Services.
Eric Larson, Assistant County Manager and County Engineer.
Oh, I'm Tim County, I'm the county manager. Just wages.
Katie Dunnigan, zoning technician.
Thank you all. We really appreciate this and appreciate y'all showing up and chatting with us. This is our first public workshop. There'll be other opportunities and other public workshops as well. Hopefully you all know, and we'll go through it later in the presentation, that we have an interactive website. We've already received lots of feedback on that website, so if you haven't been to it, please go to it, provide some comments. It is really helpful for us. The idea is that we are here to guide this process, but it is your comprehensive plan, your zoning code, your land development regulations, and we really want to hear from you. Our goal here is to provide you some initial feedback, and then we're going to we want to hear from you and also do a little bit of an interactive activity to really gauge what the community is interested in, and move this down. Sorry, it's not moving. There we go. Sorry about that. Our program here is, we introduced ourselves. Since we don't have a tremendous group here, I was hoping maybe we can just do a really brief introduction to tell us your name and if you're a resident or so, if you'd like to. Start. Yes, please.
I'm Elizabeth Lewis. I'm an Ashford resident. I live in Renton, Georgia. Paul Wheatley. I live in the south part of the county.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Ken Lee, Mayor, City of Renton.
Thank you for coming.
I'm James Garbowsky, business owner and resident of Lincoln.
Great.
Larry Belair, resident of Lincoln.
Paul Orlowski, resident of Lincoln.
Jimmy Rutland, executive director of the Habitat Community.
Tom Bridges, resident just outside of Springfield, fairly large landowner here in the county, several tracts.
Brian Cohen, business owner, Backwater Expeditions, and Guyton resident.
Adrian Weber. I'm a land broker with Wilson, Georgia.
I'm Susie Cummins. We live in the south part of the county.
David Rose, I'm the priest at St. Luke's in Lincoln and also resident in the south part of the county.
I'm Pratt Summers, resident of the county, live in the Ebenezer area.
Ryan Thompson, I'm a landscape architect with Thompson Hutton, also the current chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a resident of Effingham. I live in Eaton.
Trey Wilkins, resident of the south end of the county.
Yancey Ford, I'm school superintendent, also a resident on Midland Road.
Melissa Calhoun. I'm the juvenile court judge here in Effingham.
Brett Bennett, resident of Clare.
Anybody online, if you want to just unmute yourself and introduce, you're welcome to do so. We appreciate you all doing that because it kind of gives us an idea of, who's here and who's participating as well. So I appreciate that. So if anybody online wants to, please do.
Hey, this is Brian Herndon with the Effingham County Industrial Development Authority.
Gilberto Chacon, EOM.
Clint Hodges, Fire Department.
Damon Mullis, Executive Director at Ogeechee Riverkeeper.
Al Kraft, Hussey Gayville Engineers.
Okay. Hopefully that covers everybody. Thank you so much. We did our introductions. I also have Jaleesa Harris on the call. She's been assisting us with this process, and she's going to help on the online portion so that when you all are up here doing your voting activity, the online folks can also participate. So, purpose of the update, it's to facilitate the county's adaptation to growth. So we all know the county has been growing. So the goal of a comprehensive plan is to really prepare for that growth and manage that growth as well. We also are looking at strategically locating business, we're calling them like business clusters, provide more lifestyle choices, work, transport, housing, and to ensure that the land development regulations, which is your code of ordinances, allow the county to achieve the development goals. The comprehensive plan, sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. Oops. Comprehensive plan is a document that's designed to guide the future of the county. It's really the overall vision of the county. We talk about it as a big picture. When we talk about things like land use, that's regulated by the comprehensive plan, where the zoning code and subdivision regulations, building requirements, that's all under the land development regulations. Your land development regulations will then implement your comprehensive plan. The update that we're doing and that the county is undertaking at this point is to update the future land use portion of the comprehensive plan and the land development regulations. So that's just a basic overview. What we wanted to explain for this portion is really what's the role of the public engagement. And it's to ensure that the land use plans and development regulations reflect the community's needs and desires. Our goal is to hear from you all and know what your concerns are in zoning, talk about density, talk about square footage, talk about character areas. So we're going to give you a high level of character areas which were in the original comprehensive plan. We're looking to bring them back now. And in a future workshop that we're hoping to have, that we might do a little bit of a deeper dive. So this is really just a more of an introduction. Hear initially what your feedback is, so we can go back, call it down, and then give you more details what we want to hear from you. So we all know the county has been growing and growing a lot. And so it's really good timing to kind of have this type of an update. We have, as I mentioned, zoning regulations, and you have land use regulations. And sometimes they don't match. Sometimes there's inconsistencies there. And that's, again, part of this update, is to go ahead and see what's in your zoning code, what's in the future land use, and how we can make them work better together in the future. So we started to do an initial review of your land use regulations. I'm sorry, your zoning code regulations and the land development code. And, for instance, and you all should have received this sheet. We thought it was kind of easier to follow along with, unless you look it up on the screen, the uses. So we looked at B1 and then conditional in B1, B2, conditional in B2, and so forth. And it tells you in that what those uses are. And then you have what your height limitations and buffers are. However, when I started to look at this, I highlighted a couple of these words. Just for example, so in B1 you have professional services. You also have B2 and those conditional as offices. Well, really, are those the same? Are they different? Because there's no definitions that actually clarify what these uses are, leaves a lot of gray area, not just for staff, but for the public as well. So, we want a prescriptive document that anyone can open up and say, this is what I can do with my property. It allows for a developer to understand the rules of the game a lot better. It allows for the public to know what their neighbor can do with their property, and allows the staff to easily interpret the code and say, this is what can be built on this land. Another example was stores. So stores are allowed in B1, but in B2, retail is allowed. What are the differences? Those are inconsistencies that we've been finding. And we wanted, in a moment, we want to hear from you about some of these uses. You know, have you experienced uses in the county that seem conflicting, that seem challenging? Because that's important for us to know where we can improve and write regulations that work for the community. In the industrial district, we found that there's the industrial, but there's also in the actual text in the code, there's an industrial higher intensity, but it's actually not reflected on the map. So we found a challenge there that would be addressed. So the question we had, we're gonna have a question here about, you know, is this something that is important to the county? Is this something that you'd like to see, that there's a difference between these industrial uses? We also identified the buffers here, and the buffers is a question that we have for you all as well. We wanna talk about the buffers and see what your thoughts are. As I mentioned on the character areas, we are going to go into a deeper dive in the future with the character areas because we know that this is a little challenging to read and deserves a lot more attention as well. But the character areas will identify where the development would happen in certain kind of moments throughout the county and what that would look like. So, for example, this came from the previous comprehensive plan, where there was a number of different character areas. It had a description, it had a location of where that would be, and then it had the vision. And that's really what we're hoping to work through and find out from you, you know, where should these new character areas be, and what do you want to see? Do you want to see that there's a specific type of architecture in those areas? Do you want to see that there's a specific type of development in those areas? And that would be very, very helpful for us to identify in the future where the development potential would be. And that goes again to the development nodes. That's what would be the moments in the county where there would be the amounts of development. So what we wanted to talk initially about is the takeaways. So my takeaways when I started to review this was not having definitions of uses provides just gray areas. So we would like to further define what all uses are. We saw that there's heavy industrial, but that's not provided on the map. So we've identified that there's potentially a need for this type of industrial development, and we've identified, it's already listed in the code, but not reflected on the map. Not having a real definition of what the purpose is of the districts is also something that needs to be improved. And also potentially that we need to look at that whole list of uses that I provided to you and say, do those work? Do they not work? So, I mean, I think that the group we have, here is kind of small enough that we can kind of talk and hear your feedback. I put in some questions. These are not, you know, limiting questions. If you want to just give us some feedback about your initial thoughts about the development of the county and what you'd like to see, what your concerns are. I listed the list of uses here again on another slide. If it's easier, I can just toggle back and forth. If you want me to go to any slides, I'm happy to do so. But, you know, the purpose of our presentation is really just to give you an overall view, but hear from you. You all showed up because I think you know what's happening in the county and you have some feedback you want to give us. So we're all here to listen and take notes. And for the people online, please put any comments in the chat and when we'll address them as well. And if anybody does speak, because it needs to be recorded, I'll have to just repeat your questions. So know that, you know, when you're saying something, I'm gonna have to repeat it. So I left some questions here. I didn't know if those were any of the items you wanted to kind of talk about. When we've had initial feedback, you know, we've heard a lot about uses specifically and about buffers. So I don't know if those are things that anyone wants to chat about or what your thoughts are.
Well, the first one about buffers for industrial, wouldn't that also, wouldn't that need to be if one was a noisy one and one was a quiet operation, an indoor and one was outdoor, with a lot of noise, that could make a difference whether you needed a buffer or not, even though both of them were industrial.
Yeah, so the question is, shouldn't it matter if, even if it's industrial? So it's really not the zoning that matters, it's the actual use that matters. That if the use is a more noxious use that causes more noise, visually unattractive use versus something that is more passive, even though they're the same zoning category. And yes, that's a great point and something we should consider, that if there is a desire to consider a change in the buffers, that it would basically be by use versus by zoning, just a straight zoning district. Yes, ma'am.
As it stands now, the industrial has to have a buffer, correct?
Correct.
So what concerns me is we have these random industrial zones just all over the place. But all of a sudden, if you rezone property next to it, now all of a sudden neither of them have to have a buffer. It's like, if they already have to have a buffer, then it shouldn't matter whether it allows or not. The buffer needs to stay because, as soon as you let one not, then everybody's gonna come in and say, oh, well, they don't have a buffer, then I want my 300 feet. So, yeah, I think
So,
that has been what it is, and it should stay.
so you're saying, I just want to have to repeat that. So, okay. So the question was, if we've got, why are we considering making the change? Basically, that doesn't matter if it's a negative use. Just if it's already in the code, you're saying keep it in the code. Let's leave it as is.
Well, I just think that if you change it for a new group coming in, right now.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So anybody who was in there previously had to put it in, and now if we make a modification, they're getting a benefit that there was a previous requirement for a buffer.
Right.
Right.
And then everybody's gonna come in and start asking for no buffers.
No buffers, because they're going to be asking for a waiver. Mm-hmm.
So Sarah, we have a couple of questions and comments from our Zoom users.
Great.
One is landscape area equivalent to required green space? And then another comment of all buffers will help with noise, erosion, et cetera. Keep them. So if you want to respond to the first one.
Okay, so on the first one, would landscape area be required green space?
Is landscape area equivalent to required green space?
It's a question that we have is, how do we want to address landscape area? How do we want to address green space? So, it's something that we could make it as a requirement. Does that answer that?
I think so.
Okay. And the second one?
It was just a comment
Okay.
in favor of the buffers.
Okay.
Well, wouldn't it be different if it's an industrial park or a free property or like turn?
Is what, the buffers?
Right.
Well, it is. So the code right now, if I go back, so the buffers in industrial, so I think this slide shows it best, which shows that, if you have residential to industrial, it's a 300-foot buffer. So, and I don't think the intention is to make that modification, certainly not. It was the question that we put out there is more of just, we want to hear because we keep hearing about buffers. Is there any kind of desire when you've got industrial to industrial, is there any thought that that would be a modification? And, some feedback we got initially is, maybe it's by uses. Maybe it's that if the uses itself are not problematic. My concern with that is, if something is permitted in an industrial district, then if that new use that wasn't so aggressive leaves and a more aggressive use that comes in, that's by right. Now we have a site that could potentially be considered non-conforming, so it becomes a more complicated change. But it's something for us to consider and think about.
Well, then the buffer also a green zone also?
Yes, it's a green zone. That's right. Yes, sir.
So specifically related to industrial, to me, if it's a planned park, that the plan has been behind an industrial park and buffers to each parcel between the two, I don't personally see see them. I think it also ties to, if you do require other landscape things, there could be other landscape elements that maybe the money would be better spent in other parts of the site that would help the rest of the general public with the aesthetics of the industrial, where they're having to spend money or preserve area that's an area that really nobody would ever see between two industrial users. So I would see that, you know, especially if the zonings are together, or if there is one planned park that say has 10 different industrial sites and a buffer between those lots, to me, doesn't make sense.
So the question, to repeat that, is if it's a planned industrial park, you know, it doesn't really make sense to have the buffer between. And it's a great point, because when you've got a planned industrial park, or similar to like a planned development, you're really coming in with the overall plan for the project. And I think that is definitely a different condition than when you're developing individual lots outside of a planned development.
And I think too, just based on some of the comments here in the room, I feel like I'm on a.
I know, I know. It's hard with these to see.
But I think part of this conversation is also thinking about what is the purpose of buffer is serving, right? Because several of the comments have been made, you know, I don't want to be bothered by the industrial. So is the purpose of the buffer to protect the surrounding residential areas from a use they may not want to be exposed to? So then, in your case, it might make sense that maybe the heavier buffers are on the perimeter, but within the area, they don't make as much sense. And if another goal of the buffer is to minimize erosion and provide some areas for green space, maybe we're better off concentrating the green space in the areas that make sense based on the natural resources within that park, rather than having an arbitrary buffer just for the sake of having one. So I think this is all conversation that's very valuable, that can help us understand what's important to you as residents within the county, and being able to balance protection of your quality of life while also being able to accommodate some of that growth and development that's coming. So I think that's consistent with what we're hearing both in the room and online. And I would also say this is an opportunity. You know, I think Sarah's provided some great opportunities and questions on that list. But I would love, you know, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you. What brought you here tonight? You know, you have all chosen to take your time to be here, which is incredibly meaningful and valuable. So just share, you know, what brought you here tonight. And I'm not trying to take over your
And that's why I said, you know, we don't need to stick to those questions. It was just to provide some feedback. Yes, sir.
Who has the priority in the county? You have IDAs that build a complex, an industrial complex. Then you have industry and warehousing in the county. Between the two, who has the priority to pick which is more important, or what's going to go up on that tract of land? Is it the county first, or is the priority given to the industrial development agency?
Are we talking about like private property?
No, I'm thinking about Ebenezer Road specifically, and at the head of it, at 21N, there's an industrial development area on both sides of the road. And as you progress down towards the railroad tracks, after you go across the railroad tracks, now you develop into subdivisions. You just allowed 2 more permits to go out for more subdivisions. To me, that's a mix of a residential area to an industrial, but you have to go through the industrial to get to the residential. And then further down, you have a school complex that serves a lot of the county, but it's also going to serve the subdivisions that are being built up around it now. So how are you making the determination? And then if you go one step further, you go on Old Augusta Road, and now you get into an industrial complex and more warehousing as you move further south. How are you treating that, or how are you thinking about that as far as allowing residential areas to you know, commingle in there? How is the planning process going?
I think that's why exactly what we're kind of chatting about here, because, as I talked about in one of the other slides, how there's inconsistencies between the land use and the zoning. And so if it's allowed by right in the zoning code and or on the zoning map and in the comprehensive plan, they can build it. And so there is going to be that choppiness and that inconsistency. And the real purpose of this is really to hear from the public and then be able to identify, should we be making modifications to those maps and the plans to guide development into the more appropriate areas?
And just to my point, at the end of Fort Howard, at Old Augusta, the proposal, the way I remember it, was going to be apartments or multi-residences. That has now, I believe, changed to where it's either warehousing or some industrial part of that. Who has any say in that? Is it strictly the county? Is it the planning board itself? How is that being determined? Because ultimately, it gets into the broader question about schools and the effect on the cities, et cetera. If you're gonna go ahead and move industrial complexes on Old Augusta, you don't need schools there. But if you're gonna go ahead and do other areas that are strictly residential, you need the school expansion there. And Ebenezer Road is a perfect example where the Ebenezer schools eventually, I'm presuming there's still some dream to do a high school over there to pick up the growth of the area. But if you're gonna go ahead and allow all that land to be industrial, you won't need that expansion for that school. So where are you gonna put it?
So the land in the county all has future land use designation, okay? So that's what's governed by the comprehensive plan. So the land will say it's either industrial or commercial or residential or however it's going to be stated. And then you have zoning that implements that. So if the land already states that it's allowing all of these types of uses, and if someone comes in and chooses to build, because there's no real guidance at this point, and that's really why we're trying to understand, do we want to make these changes? Does it make sense? That it aligns it better, and so that we can say, what, this area, and that's really what goes to the point of having these character areas, is to say, this is more appropriate for a focus on residential, and it may be all different types of residential, we'll get into that later, but, or maybe it's more appropriate for industrial because of that there's all these other industrial forces here already. It makes more sense from a traffic perspective or what. But without having that as our basis and the codes right now and the requirements right now simply allow it, the county cannot say, we don't like this. Even if people come out and say, this isn't a great project, if it's allowed by the requirements and it's in the laws, basically, it's very challenging to say, we just don't like how it feels. And that's really why we're kind of having this, to say, this is a great opportunity to rewrite some of those requirements to see if you don't like that, let's see how we can effectuate change.
I think part of some of the confusion comes from the fact that when he's asking about the IDA, you have an industrial park directly across the road from Lanford Elementary School, and that entire school is going to be surrounded by an industrial park, which is absolutely ridiculous. And we were told that that was agreed upon by the IDA, that was not the board. So who has the hammer? I mean, sometimes we don't know, because there was no, and the public hearings on the industrial park across from Lanford Road occurred after it was already agreed, already signed, and there was nothing that we could, as residents, could do about it.
Is there anyone here from the IDA?
I'm surprised.
Yeah, hey,
I'm kind of surprised the commissioners aren't here, because this says this is for county input.
He's on Zoom, and I think he's happy to answer. Brad?
Yeah, this is Brian Herndon. I'm the CEO of the Effingham County Industrial Development Authority. And without going into too much detail about I'll address two things real quickly about Blandford Elementary. That happened years and years ago. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure as to how things played out the way they are. But as I tell people, and I've made this comment several times today, the school is there, the industrial part's there. So this is what we're trying to do is how do we address it? There's been many questions as to will Blandford be moved or not be moved? There's ongoing conversations about it, about what to do about Blandford. But at the end of the day, the school's there and it's process of expanded. There are conversations going as to what we can do about it. And I'll just leave it at that because I just don't need to comment anymore about that at this particular point in time. So, but it is important to the IDA, and I think I can speak for the county, and I can speak for the developer, and I can speak for the Board of Education. Everybody is aware of it, and we're doing everything we can to mitigate the traffic. I think everybody's done an excellent job right now with the school traffic, and it will continue to be a major point of concern for us moving forward, even if the school cannot be moved. But we'll just have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. Switching over to Old Augusta Road, somebody was asking about that property at Fort Howard Road. That property is owned by the IDA. We bought it from the county. It will be industrial, but it will not be warehousing. It is our mandate or our interest and our desire to have higher paying jobs, more in the way of the manufacturing or assembly, where it's not our intention to compete with the private developers who are building warehouses. And so our goal is to create jobs, higher paying jobs for the citizens of Effingham County. And that's what we're going to do out there. So, but I do want to address those two subjects. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that I can answer. But going back to Blandford, it's just an ongoing conversation, but we're doing the best we can.
I have a question for you, and your group. So when did you get involved in all this? Because now it seems like you're the second group, and the first group didn't listen. And so now, I mean, I'm sorry, but whether you realize it or not, you're coming into a big giant mess because they've been rezoning willy-nilly. So you're talking about whether it's allowed or not, and it's like, well, it wasn't allowed last week, but now this week it is.
We were put under contract just around the end of last year, I believe. It was right around the end of last year. So with a very specific scope, and our scope was to update the land development regulations, as well as focus on the land uses as part of the comprehensive plan, including character areas. So ours was a pretty specific scope. I can't speak to what previous team or previous process you went through, and I'm sorry for that. But so that was what we were asked to do. Yes, sir.
I was speaking with a lot of residents, and we're pretty upset that if there was some kind of a plan, nobody's following through. If anyone can buy land and get rezoned to whatever and build some commercial site right next to neighborhoods, and it makes no sense. There should be a plan that keeps neighborhood areas, residential areas, from getting large businesses put it right in the center. But it seems to be not followed whatsoever.
So I think part of this too is the fact that we're going to be looking at the rezoning criteria. So when your rezoning criteria is sometimes not as I don't want to say enforceable, but not stringent enough, it becomes very challenging to say that it's not something. So if someone comes in with a zoning application and it doesn't have enough teeth, basically in the ordinance that says this shouldn't be rezoned because of some reason, it becomes very challenging to say that doesn't, we're not going to rezone it. So that's really part of our scope and our task as well, to look at the zoning criteria and say, is the idea to preserve residential? And typically, that's the purpose of zoning. And so it will be something we are going to be looking at and you know, hopefully strengthening. I don't know if Denise has anything you want to add to that too, from your
No,
experience.
I think the other thing is, you know, Effingham County has been a rapidly growing county for many, many years. And this is not unique to Effingham County dealing with, you know, how do you manage the growth that is coming your way. The growth is not, you know, there's no gate that can be closed, right? So it's thinking about how can county leaders best manage growth in a way that speaks to what you value as residents of Effingham County, while also continuing for the county to be prosperous. You know, there's a tendency to think we just want all residential. Residential is great, but the reality is residential alone does not typically pay for itself because the cost of providing services to residential is substantially higher than it is for providing than for commercial or industrial. So to be economically successful as a community, and also really to have a quality of life where you can have what you need in Effingham County without necessarily having to go down to Pooler or Chatham County or Statesboro or somewhere else. But what we want to really try and determine is how can we accommodate that wide variety of uses and also the forces that are part of this region. So I live in Savannah. I've been in Savannah for over 2 decades, and I used to work for Effingham County, so I've been here and experienced a lot of this change. But this is what we're really grappling with is how can we put together a plan that the Board of Commissioners and your Planning Commission can look to and say, okay, we have confidence that this reflects what we have heard from our community, and we're going to go by this in order to make our decisions, and we're going to have the criteria that lay out that guidance for the elected officials to be able to follow. So that's the goal. It's a continuing goal, and it's not a perfect process. We will not get it right out of the gate. I'm going to tell you that right now. So if you're frustrated because, oh my gosh, we've been this before and we're still, but it is a process where are going to continue to try and get better and make the improvements in your code, which is basically the law of the land of how things happen, so that the rules are clear and everybody has a common understanding expectation of what to expect. So hopefully that's helpful. Yes, sir.
So let me preface my question real quick because I was a little bit late, so I apologize for that. I am also a transplant, and to me, I understand what a lot of the people that have been here a long time are saying, because I was shocked at how disorganized the planning seems. So I completely understand the frustration. In a short time, I've also seen some of these road projects that were supposed to be helpful actually hinder and make things worse. So, with just that general observation, this question that you initially started off with the boundary or buffer, whatever it's called, why do we need to reduce it, first of all? Why are we looking to get rid of it?
We're not. It was a question that I want, you know, to kind of, a lot of times in these public meetings, we don't have a lot of feedback.
Yep.
And, you know, we figured, let's put a question out there that sparks some interest and get some feedback.
Okay, that's perfect.
So nothing in here is for us to be set in stone. It is your plan. And so we're facilitators.
And I'm not attacking.
No, I got you.
I want to make sure, because being that I've worked in the construction industry for a very long time, unless it's really required, I mean, unless there is a significant reason to change it.
Right.
To me, there's really no benefit in giving that up right now. Now, if you create a way that somebody can request a variance and look at it on a case-by-case basis, I think that makes more sense, you know? But just saying, we're not gonna allow the buffer, I would personally say, don't do that. I would say, keep it, and then evaluate it from when it comes up at that particular so to answer that.
If I could just state one thing, though, I
Yeah,
think it's what sparked and it was important in that conversation was also the discussion about, well, if it's a planned development, if it's an industrial park, should there be a different discussion? And then should the focus then be on the perimeter? Because that becomes more important. So I think that initial question actually sparked an important discussion, and we did receive some good feedback on that. So that's kind of the purpose of this, too.
Okay, and I don't disagree with that.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's great to have the buffer. But I do think, the thing about sound is when you have two potential sources of sound, they can actually exacerbate when they're together. And so having that sound barrier actually breaks that up and helps reduce that. So if you remove any barrier, put those two sound sources together, it's actually gonna sound louder. That's the way sound works. As an engineer, I deal with that day in, day out. So, I would say that, my personal opinion on that as a new resident is, keep the barriers. I actually moved here because I didn't like how Garden City looked. I didn't want to live in the middle of Savannah. I wanted something that was a little bit more homey, rural feeling, if you will. That's why I lived here, and chose to be here. It offered a lifestyle that gives me something different that those places can offer. We already have a lot of jobs that we can't fill. And to continue to build and do that, I feel like it's going the way of Cooler, And now Cooler is such a mass amount of people that I feel like they didn't plan for. And I would hate to see Rankin do that. I think the schools are getting overwhelmed. The traffic around the schools aren't safe for the people. We're seeing traffic go over that stuff. So, I guess as a concerned citizen, please, do it strategically, do it, at a reasonable pace. It can definitely get away from us. I would hate to see what I moved here for get lost completely.
It's great comments, and I think a lot of people in this room are probably feeling that, too. So I appreciate you saying it.
So just for the people on Zoom, just real quickly, so the gentleman was just speaking about the quality of life that he moved here for and wanting to keep that, the quality of life and not become overdeveloped like so many other communities in our area have. Is that a fair synopsis?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, for the quick.
For the quick. And we've got all this recorded. And just another quick comment that we've gotten from Zoom, someone who is not in favor of more warehouses, that is concerned about the infrastructure strain that warehouses and trucking provides, or the impact on local infrastructure.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think a lot of what we're dealing with comes from the Industrial Development Authority, and maybe the county manager can comment on this too. It is an authority. It is like the hospital. It has authority to do things that I believe our county commissioners can't even overrule. And this was started, I think it was by Governor Deal way back. And so I think a lot of our, not all of it, but I think that a lot of the growth and the misplacement maybe of some of these warehouses is due directly to them. There's also not a movement, but, one of the legislators, Mary Margaret, I can't remember her last name. Anyway, she is in the Georgia legislature, not from our area, but she has questioned a lot of this because it is happening, I think, all over Georgia. So could you comment on that, Mr. Ballmer?
Sure. I can say that the Industrial Development Authority is a constitutional authority. It's created by the legislature. It's not created by the by county government. It has its own taxing authority. It taxes 2 mills a year to fund its operations. It has a board that effectively answers It does not have unlimited authority that the government has. I mean, it's still, in the case of Grandview track at the end of Fort Howard, in the case of the Savannah Gateway Industrial Hub, which is the industrial park that surrounds Blandford. That's in the county jurisdiction. The other one's in Rankin City's jurisdiction, but they still have authority with regards to zoning of that property. Now, a lot of that has been zoned for decades, and so it can't be kind of unzoned for its current use. And so it still has to go, so any sort of zoning changes still have to go to the county, but a lot of times these have occurred so long ago that, you know, that it's, they already have their rights based on that particular zoning. I will say in those cases that I just mentioned, both of those tracks were originally slated for, and certainly in the case of the Omnitrax industrial hub, thousands of homes before the industrial authorities stepped in. In the case of Gateway, Grandview, I'm sorry, that one was a dispute with the developer that the county ended up having to buy the land, which brings up another topic that I wanted to bring up, which is you can't always just simply say no, that there are cases where your no may not be constitutional and you will have to pay for that. We have had multiple multi-million-dollar awards for developers against the county over the years that have resulted by the county saying no to something and then having to, and then ultimately getting sued. So I just kind of I wanted to bring that up separately, but no, the industrial authority does have the authority to purchase land. They do have the authority to condemn property. The counties and the cities are still responsible for zoning of that, but you know, so there is a limitation there. So the county, the IDA can't condemn a piece of land, take it over, then zone it. Doesn't have that authority. It would still have to go to the county to, or the city to zone the property. But that answers.
Yes, sir.
Just to piggyback on what I originally asked, and thank you for that response that kind of gives you priority. Ebenezer Road is Georgia 275. It's a state highway. It's a two-lane road. It feeds trucks. That's its principal use. It's a truck route. Becomes Old Augusta, which is a county highway, I believe. Okay? It feeds trucks. We've just spent, the residents of this county have just invested a whole bunch of money into a couple of nice schools. Beautiful. Fort Howard. At one time, I think trucks used to come down Fort Howard so they can go ahead and make the left turn before the circle to go for Plain. Well, now we have a beautiful school in Ebenezer, which is being fed by children from Springfield up north, regional, coming in there. It's a two-lane road with no buffer on the new subdivisions. So if you ever tried to consider that highway being expanded to 3 lanes, 4 lanes, 5 lanes, you have no buffer to eat up. And the backyards are right up against those roads. Now, at that school, very nice school, beautiful school, elementary and middle. Eventually, I don't know what the plan is, but that's schooling thing. Probably a high school can go in an area somewhere. It makes sense that if you go ahead and use the same complex, because you have water out there, you have sewers, et cetera, makes sense. A lot of infrastructure needs are taken care of if you consolidate your construction site. And if you expand that, it's gonna pick up people from Springfield, et cetera. My point is that, continue on what I was asking before, is that if we have trucks that, if those trucks try to get through at 3:15 on a weekday, they're stopped at the circle with a sheriff's deputy directing traffic at the school. It don't work. I'm telling you, it don't work. You could not get an emergency vehicle through that area. It won't work. So the point is, if you're gonna plan this in some way, you already have trucks that have to go somewhere. You're already gonna have industrial complexes that are gonna have more people dismissed at 3:30 or whatever time they could work. And the same thing in the morning. Well, the infrastructure needs to work with the zoning so that you can go ahead and project in this 20, 40-year plan. I won't be here for it, probably. But for 2040, can the traffic go through? Will the schools be expanded? Will the subdivisions be built around it? Will there be water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure services? And that has to be considered before anything is built and anything is permitted. And I think that was your point originally, is that you have to look at the future. There's a lot of good things happening here. Growth is great. We're supporting all of Georgia, surrounding states. Effingham is great, it's good. But the planning process has to incorporate those things, not for 2022, but 2040, like you're saying. And I just wanted to, I know we're not here to talk about roads and stuff like that. And I'm just saying is that schools, subdivisions, you know, you try to, I don't know what the federal plan is currently, but you know what? Federal plan at one time said we're eliminating the city and we're turning it into suburbia. And we are, in some cases in the county, that we have different housing going up already, or at least the land is great, that new housing is going up, and that needs to be supported. And as the county continues to grow, the infrastructure where you direct traffic off of I-16 and Effingham Parkway and 119 and, you know, 21 going north, you have to think ahead to say, what's our plan 20 years from now, and is it gonna work?
So to try to summarize, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to be focusing, as we're developing and as you're looking at what kind of a plan we're going to be having, that the plans actually work together so that we have a plan for any kind of residential that works well with any future industrial, and we focus on the level of service for those roads, for infrastructure, and so forth, so that we can properly plan and project for the future, so that if we're talking about, you know, 20 plus years from now, that we haven't created a mess, basically. Yes, sir.
Talking about uses and mixture of uses, I did notice one of your questions was about mixed use. And I would say I definitely would encourage the county to consider those appropriate areas. Your traffic concerns, you know, appropriate area with mixture of uses, because they have trips from vehicles having to travel all over the county for different services. You know, I know I saw some nodes on one of the maps that that would be wonderful to see in some spots. And just, you know, I would also, back to the question about is buffer, I would suggest we should question anything in there that might be, is there something better that we can get somewhere else for what we're asking for here that's not really accomplishing what we think we're trying to accomplish? Because, you know, there's a need for housing, and there's a need for housing that people can afford. So we gotta keep that in mind, you know, think about things, and let's make sure we're protecting the community we want, but that the code that we're analyzing is doing that. So
So just to summarize that, the question or the comment was to consider, looking at potential for mixed use, as it would take some cars off the road or take them from one side of the county to the other, because if you have a concentration of uses in one location, it does help with potential traffic issues. And so, like I said, also, I think that deserves kind of a deep dive into another workshop, and we're going to spend some more time talking about that in the future too. So keep that in mind as you keep seeing information on the website, because we want the continued feedback, and we want to provide some more after this session about what the next group meeting is going to be about too. Ma'am, you had a comment?
Your group, I'm not certain as to what all it entails. And everybody's talking about roads, schools, industrial parks, housing, and that. Do you also take into consideration what all these, when we have the increased number of population, what the services are that they are going to need into the future? Right now, we've got a increase in DFAX cases, increase in BJJ cases, all of that. We need more affordable housing for these people. We need mental health care for the youth. We don't have a boys and girls club. We have nothing set up for these kids. We've got great recreational facilities, but that's not helping the drugs issue. That's not helping the other mental health issues. So do you take into consideration, your group take into consideration, we're pushing these people into the county. Now do we have services to fund them, or are we just gonna have more issues than what we have currently?
So I appreciate the comment. The comment for anybody on Zoom was, are we looking at anything outside of the traditional infrastructure and roadway uses and more social issues as well? So affordable housing is something we actually look at as part of the comprehensive plan. The other uses or the concerns that you brought up is actually when we write the comprehensive plan, we look at population projection, we look at different thresholds that are required for us to look at per the state requirements. The county then has that tool because it does go through state review. And so when the county looks at potential for grant funding, looks at potential for other types of expansion of social services, they can refer back to this document that gets approved through the state and says, okay, that is what the county has identified. They've done the full analysis to identify that, this is that they have this need of housing, that they have, this population coming in, that they have this level of income. And based on that, you're able to then pursue additional resources, but this document doesn't go into that level because we're mostly looking at level of service for certain criteria, which is identified by the state of Georgia.
Ma'am, with the zone, in regarding the housing and the mixed use, something they did back in Denver or started to do, and I know we're not in Denver, but I'll just bring it up as an option, is they started to mix in a variety of economic individuals together. So that you did not separate individuals, because where you might have a congregation of lower income people, typically services stop going to those locations. What they've started to do is say, okay, we're going to mix them in with people that can afford the services and try to break that up a little bit so it didn't get run down, all the different problems that come with that. I think with mixed use, you could do that. And I would say also with mixed use, don't congregate it too much. Maybe spread it out a little bit. Pull people left and right, connect those with greenways or something like that. Allow people to move, relatively close, just like we were saying. And I think you will use some of the traffic flow that way. I do, think that was a great suggestion. But that is something that you could do and kind of mix it up with and help the community.
Right.
Look at.
So to summarize, that if if we do look at mixed use, it should also encourage mixed income as well. Okay. Yes, ma'am?
I'm just trying to clarify, so this plan is strictly dealing with commercial, it has nothing to do with social services at all?
When you're saying social services,
Well,
so
I'm
explain to me what you
saying-
mean.
Oh, well, I'm saying things like, hospital and, places for doctors and fire and, yeah, I mean, all of the supporting, infrastructure, it's not just, I mean, yes, we need more restaurants or, I'd love to have a dry cleaner for, and that's all fine and dandy, but, if, I mean, sorry, I had COVID last year, it's a 15-minute drive to the hospital. And the services that, they send you home from the hospital, and the services that say, oh, well, we service your area, and it's like, okay, well, this is where I live. Oh, well, and I'm talking to somebody in South Carolina who has no idea where I am, and she's like, oh, well, it's in Savannah. I'm like, I'm an hour away.
Right.
So, no, we need things to, as the judge said, you have to support the people who are living here and not just, and I thought that this 2040 plan was including that, clearly the hospital needs to be bigger. We need to have a hospital.
Yeah.
You can actually take care of that.
Right. So it's not to say, and I don't want to misjudge, to misspeak, to say that, the goal is that we're going to identify exactly where something is going to be developed, because that's really not the purpose, right? So once we identify as a community and write it into the plan to state that this is what, these are what your needs are. So that's what the comprehensive plan portion is, to identify that these are the income level, that this is the housing needs, that this is the affordability needs. The county can then use that as a greater tool for additional resources. So that's really the comprehensive plan portion, and it's big picture. So the zoning code or land development regulations are really a different animal, and that's really the purpose of that is to talk about, where if someone wishes to develop, what that would look like. But it's the comprehensive plan that's really the tool that kind of can guide that future development, and the county can use that to gain the additional resources. But it's not really like a silver bullet to say that this is going to be exactly what we're going to be able to develop, and this is, now we're going to have this expanded hospital and so forth.
Sarah, we do have one person who wants to make a comment, but just real quickly, I think that your point is very valid, and I think part of this is a very complex conversation that has to be a continuing one. And when you look at certain uses, whether it's commercial or medical or whatever else it might be, they have to have a critical mass of population that they serve in order to locate here. So there are trade-offs. If you value living in a more rural area, that's great, but one of the trade-offs is you might have to go farther for the conveniences and the service.
And I understood that when I moved here. We've been here 5 years.
Right.
And right, but unfortunately, they're turning it into a no longer rural area.
But I think that's.
If it's not gonna be rural anymore, then they need to plan to support all these people that they decided to plan in.
And I think understanding on the community where you are on that spectrum, do you want to be more rural and further from services, or just somewhere in between? It's a complex.
I would rather y'all go away and do this fine. I mean, it's nothing personal. It is nothing personal. I mean,
How long have you been here?
5 years.
5 years. I've been here 70 years.
Exactly.
Right.
In the 5 years, it's been a tremendous.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
I've seen massive changes
Yeah.
since
Oh,
this county grew.
absolutely.
Two of the previous county managers made the comment at different times that personal property taxes residential property taxes cannot provide the services for the county. Fire, police, schools, all that. You've got to have industrial. You got to have the good paying jobs. You've got to have the base where this industry is paying taxes on an industrial basis to fill the coffers. Because all of us that have a house, you pay taxes, it doesn't pay the bills. So warehouses, yeah, but there's not a lot of them. I know, exactly, it's not doing it. So we need the industrial, but we also need to do it because we like the country. We need to have it, we need to protect areas. And I see some of the maps up there, you're talking about protecting some areas. I mean, with the counties in, how much can you actually say you can't build industrial here in this big area or whatever? But yes, we want to protect the country lifestyle, but we also need the industrial in order to help pay the taxes here in the county.
Thank you for that comment. Ma'am, just give me one moment. There's somebody online that's been trying to get through too.
Tim, you've got the floor.
Thank you. A few points, really to address some of the earlier conversation about how the commissioners just don't have the ability to say no. That's actually false. Just because it meets zoning, they can check the boxes on the zoning request does not mean it has to be approved. They can deny based on anything related to public health, safety, morality, and welfare. There's loads of case studies that supports that kind of denial. If the detriment outweighs the public benefit of the current zoning classification, if it changes the characteristics of the neighborhood or community, there's lots of reasons they can deny. And again, there's already case studies to support that. In addition, they can deny based on infrastructure alone. It's literally a question on the rezoning request that first passes through the planning board that the commissioners then certify essentially when they take that package and make a decision based off of it. There's a question basically, is it burdensome to the existing infrastructure, roads and schools? Yet every single request that comes through, the answer is no, of course not. And it's never questioned by our commissioners. So you talk about, do we need to rewrite rezoning rules and things like that? The first and foremost, our elected officials need to enforce the current zoning rules and ordinances. I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but there's a tree ordinance for major subdivisions in this county. Any tree that's not basically where a structure is being built or a road is being built, services, et cetera, that's 6 inches in diameter at 4 feet tall, it's a healthy tree, that has to be left. But yet, what do you see when you drive around our community? Clear-cut neighborhoods. They go in and they take mature woods and they clear-cut them, and then they build these neighborhoods on top. And that definitely degrades the character of the county. When I spoke to the code enforcement officer, he wasn't even aware there was a tree ordinance. Then when he did more research, the county attorney or the county engineer said that they're gaming the system and they're being issued logging permits before they're building subdivisions. One, that's not true. The rezoning requests have already been approved before the logging is taking place. And two, if it's not, then why is the county approving a logging permit on a property that's been rezoned for a subdivision? In the master plans in the past, they've outlined all these great ideas for maintaining the integrity and character of the county with these subdivisions, these developments. They talk about leaving trees and have nice entrances and having services, et cetera, within the communities. They don't enforce any of it. So we can talk all day about updating the way the rezoning rules are, et cetera. But when our commissioners don't listen, when they approve major warehousing to go in across and surrounded by residential areas with tremendous outcry against it, when it does not fit the area, but yet it does fit in and really benefits the pockets of some traditional names in Effingham, we've got a problem. The other thing, as far as the residential is concerned, is the high density housing. There's no reason to have it. These builders can still make money building these developments with leaving trees and building them on decent sized lots. There's no reason they should be able to have to build on a lot less than 1/4 of an acre. Effingham County is basically built on top of wetlands. We just had meetings a couple months ago about concerns over having to develop a new stormwater runoff system because of the fact that with all this development, we don't have anywhere for the water to drain to. So when you've got these developers coming in and they're having developments approved where they're literally building wetland border to wetland border, and building houses on 0.1 acres to 0.15 acres, there's no permeable surface left that's not wetlands. Increase the lot size requirement. And the other thing that would do, because now our commissioners have started talking about, they want to see green space. They want to see places for kids to play in these neighborhoods. But yet what they don't take into consideration is the fact, great, you can put parks in the neighborhoods, but how are the kids supposed to get to them? Because they allow these developers to build such small lots, there's not even room for cars to park in the driveway. So they illegally park in the road. And when they do park in the driveway, they block the sidewalks because the driveways are too short, because the lots are too small. So great, now you've required a builder to put a park in, but the kid's got to walk down the road to get to the park. Increase the lot size, it solves so many problems. Enforce the parking ordinance. There is no parking on a county road that's less, on a subdivision road that's less than 28 feet wide. These developers are building 22-foot wide roads because it allows them to squeeze more houses in. And then people are parking in the neighborhoods. And it's terrible. But the county will not enforce it. The code enforcement officer said he is prohibited from enforcing that county ordinance because the judge has said because there's no parking signs, they cannot enforce the ordinance. So the suggestion was, why don't you require no parking signs? Well, because then we'd have to go back and require all the other developments to put them up. And what's the problem? So first and foremost, we need to make sure that enforcement of current ordinances and zoning requirements that are designed to maintain the integrity of the county are enforced. And as far as the industrial development, it's been said many times on here, warehousing is not industrial development. Warehousing, it's a drain on the community. It does not provide a net benefit to the community. You know who it provides a net benefit to? Georgia Ports Authority. Does Effingham County see any of those dollars? No, they do not. These trucks are on county roads, on our roads that taxpayers are having to pay to build and maintain. The Effingham Parkway was originally sold under the guise that it was for citizens, for traffic to get out of the county. The entire purpose of that road was to service that research tract, that Savannah Gateway Industrial Hub. We were already suckered into building a road for these trucks. We don't need to build more roads. There are no roads for trucks. We've got 1.5 warehouses open right now in that tract, and we're already seeing issue after issue with these trucks on residential roads that they're not designed for. If you continue to allow warehouses to be developed in there, it's going to turn this into Port Wentworth and Garden City. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's already not enough ways to get out of the county. You can't put all these trucks on the road and expect it to get better. Now, what can be done is the marketing agreement for that property can definitely be revisited, because when the current broker was engaged to market that property on behalf of the IDA, and there's articles, all kinds of information about this, it was to bring jobs. And I quote, thousands of high-paying jobs to the county. You don't get there with warehousing at 25 jobs per million square feet. Does not happen. If they want to market this purely for warehousing, which is what they do, I would encourage any of you to go out and look at the Omnitrax marketing information. It's all warehouses. If you look at the aerials, there's not even room for a manufacturer because there's barely 30 or 40 parking spots per facility. They're built right on top of each other with no parking. They also show access to Hodgeville Road, which is interesting since we've been told that that will not be, that will be restricted to trucks. But that's how this property is being marketed. So the IDA absolutely has control over whether or not we bring warehouses in. There should be zero incentives for a warehouse in the county, period. If that warehouse is not tied to an affiliate manufacturing facility that's next door, we don't need them. Target the manufacturers. Throw all the money at the manufacturers and bring them in. We could bring a few manufacturers into that Savannah Gateway Industrial Hub and bring far more jobs into the county than we would ever by filling the whole county with warehouses. We'd get the actual tax revenue then, we'd get good income then without having the drain on the local tax coffers from having to constantly redo roads. So that's the easy thing that the IDA can do. There's absolutely no reason to have the warehousing. And I don't know if you create a separate zoning category for warehousing and actually make the commissioners, follow it, because the warehouses should only be out by the interstate. They don't need to be in the middle of our community. I hear people talk about they want more services and this and that, and they are right. You're not going to get the businesses to come in when you don't have your population centers close enough to that. All the development now is out towards South Effingham. All that Benton Boulevard connector did was make it give more incentive for businesses to not come into Rincon, because all those homes in South Effingham are more convenient to Pooler than they are in downtown Rincon. The other thing, I work with a business owner who's been trying to put up a restaurant in Rincon for the last year. He has been given far more difficult of a time than any developer. That property at the end of Goshen Extension by Chimney Road, the 4.5 million square feet of warehouse space, that went through rezoning and had dirt moved in a third of the time this customer has been trying to get a permit for a restaurant in Rincon. We make it far too hard for the citizens of Effingham County and small businesses in Effingham County to accomplish simple requests, and then we cater to out-of-town developers. It makes no sense. We've got Effingham County small businesses who employ far more people than these warehouses. They don't get any incentives. They don't get any tax relief on any of their inventory, but yet we're doing it for out-of-town developers where all the money is leaving the county. It makes no sense. So stop what we're doing. There should be a moratorium, first of all, on any new housing developments in the South Effingham part of the county. The schools are already over capacity. We're already seeing redistricting that we just saw a few years ago. The problem is there's no redistricting that's going to solve the problem with middle and high school. We don't have anywhere to redistrict the kids to. And we're already at capacity there. I've got 2 daughters at South Effingham Middle School in advanced classes, and they've got 27 and 29 kids in the class. My wife's an art teacher at South Effingham Elementary. She's got classes with over 30 kindergartners in them. Only going to get worse. 3 to 5 years to build a school once a need's been identified. Problem is, land costs are out of control because all these developers are able to come in and build these high-density housing. School board can't find land affordable enough to be able to build a school. Stop the high-density housing approvals. Stop the warehouses. Bring some character back to Effingham County. The old Effingham neighborhoods where they had larger lots, they left trees. And now come 20 years later, those are still nice neighborhoods. Go drive through a Jamestown. That's a 20-year-old neighborhood that's still a nice neighborhood. It wasn't even an expensive neighborhood. They left character when they built it. They left trees. They put bigger yards in. That's what Effingham County was. Compare that to Emerald Plantation. Look at phase 1 compared to phase 2 and phase 3 where they clear cut. There is a dramatic difference in character. And it didn't cost any more for them to develop phase 1 as it did phase 2 or phase 3.
Thank you so much for your comments, Tim. We've got some other folks here in the room that would like to speak, so we appreciate you being here virtually and sharing your comments with us. Thank you.
And ma'am, I know you had one more, she had a comment. Okay.
He talked about Port Wentworth, and if things don't change, we will be Port Wentworth. I live in the middle of Rincon off of 9th Street, and I can tell you since they've redone, because I drive my son to Statesboro to Georgia Southern. He got in a car accident, whole story. But since they changed 9th Street, I don't know what you want to call it. They're calling it Helen Keller Road.
Helen Keller intersection.
Yeah, I have to drive that at least 2 days a week. And the trucks, it's a sin. Someone is, I don't know if someone may have gotten killed there already, but I can't even understand. I don't understand. I'm from Louisiana, and I'm from down the bayou, where there's no planning. Okay, there's planning here compared to where I'm from. And I moved away from there for a reason 22 years ago, because I wanted something better for the children. My children are grown, they're in college. But I know young families that are coming up here, they're not getting what we got 22 years ago. Because it's so dangerous for kids to drive, teenagers to drive. It's sad what it's turned into. And I live in the middle of Rincon. I can barely turn to get on to 21. Because there's trucks coming up that road and they're not turning. So, I don't know. It's upsetting, that's why I'm here.
I appreciate that.
Years ago and I loved it. I don't like it anymore.
So just to summarize, we're talking character, like bring back the character, and that's what we're hoping to do. It's like sometimes the horse has left the barn on some things, but there's ways we can make improvements, and that's why we're We're happy you're here, and we want to hear from you and appreciate that. And we encourage you to keep up with this process because it is going to take the next few months. And the feedback we're getting is that, you know, it's not, we had an initial, and we'll go through that in a moment, we had an initial stakeholders group, and that was really great because we're able to hear some of, you know, the feedback and the high level of what concerns people have. And now our next, you know, is hearing from you all as well. And I'll take one more comment because we're going to jump to the voting activity too. We reached out, or the county did as well, to a group of citizens, business owners, and so forth. And if you go to the website, you could actually see that initial meeting. We had an initial meeting where we just heard high level what, you know, concerns people had as well. So this is like I said, a long process, about a year-long process. And we didn't come into this with any kind of ideas ahead of time because that's the purpose, is going through this. We want to do what we're, this voting activity with y'all. You should have received some stickers. What we want to do is go through, we put up some boards here, and then for the online group, Jaleesa is going to kind of walk you through it. So she's going to have a poll so y'all can participate as well. But what we wanted to do, and you know, I think just some of the discussion we've heard, a lot of our questions are already answered up here, but this is helpful for us. So we put up here the R3 district, which is multifamily. We want to know, do you want to see changes? You'll see an option there for changes. Do you want to see certain changes? And we put those options in there. Also, then we put over the North County. What kind of housing do you want to see? And, you know, put multiple if you like more than one. If you don't, just stick it right on there, what you like. Same with the south part of the county. The next board we have is about commercial businesses. Where do you want to see them? Do you want to see them concentrated into mixed-use plazas? Or do you want to see them anywhere on Highway 21? You know, that's important for us, and it goes back to the question about the mixed use and concentrating and potentially helping with traffic conditions. Sense of place along commercial corridors. So, you know, what do we want to look at, and do you like one versus the other? And then the last is about architecture. Right now, there's not a standard for architecture, and then there we kept it right there on the bottom blue box that says if you don't want to have architectural standards, just, you know, that's a good answer too. You can put a dot there. Otherwise, what do you like? And you know, maybe you don't like any of them, and that would be under the architecture, or just tell us you don't like them. But those are the types of features that we wanted to see. And Jaleesa, I'm assuming you're going to, I'm going to mute us here so the team, so everybody doesn't hear the feedback. But if you want to chat with online, to tell them how to do the poll.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. All right, so welcome everyone. I will take us back to the first slide, and I will launch a poll, and we'll go one by one through these slides.
Okay.
Each poll, you will have about 5 minutes to select your choice. As you can see, the first slide, we're going to talk about multifamily housing. Right now, the current code allows a building height maximum of 35 feet, which is about 2 or 3 stories. And that's, you can have about 12 units per acre. We have 2 options where we may change the code. Option 1 is where you can increase the number of units that are allowed per acre. This does not necessarily make the building bigger. So we're just going with a very, very general voting activity just to get some ideas, but they're not too specific. So let's start. I'll launch the first one, and I'll give everyone about 5 minutes to select what they want. Keep the code as it is, make the buildings just a little bit higher. So we say a slight change. And we gave a couple of pictures that can show you what that may look like in your community. So you have until 7:31.
When the land is built up.
And when you're making your vote, think about the fact that more people are going to move to Effingham County. So the buildings that we choose and the code that we choose does not affect the number of people that will come. This is going to affect how we manage the growth. So would you like to keep more people in one place instead of spreading them out throughout the county? So keep that in mind when you're making your vote.
Yeah, did you do that? Okay, good. And so if you, I mean, I have your comments, so I'll.
This project is just about managing the growth.
Really helpful for us to keep track of as well. 'Cause there's options where you can, you know.
I'm born and raised in Georgia, so.
That's a good answer.
We have about 3 more minutes, and it looks like we have about half of the people have participated. So if we can get a few more people.
Excellent points.
Make sure you put up your dots so you know.
So who's, I was here late, so
Yeah.
who's who here?
So, here, I'll come over.
Someone else said that too.
So we're doing it virtually, so I've got.
Just so you know, the people who are in person are doing the exact same activity as you. So in the end, we will put together and count and tally all of the responses. And the summary of everything will be posted on the Social Pinpoint website, so the project website.
So I make that trip all the time, so when I see the traffic. Yeah, she came from the lot.
You guys have about 1 more minute to respond.
So I want to find out about that.
We're waiting for about 5 more people to give their answers. And if they're not able to see the poll, just so you know, the first option is no change. Option 1 is change the code a little bit just to allow more units in the same acre. So maybe smaller apartments. And the second option is to change the code just to make the buildings a little bit higher than before. So if you want to type your answer privately to me, if you can't see the poll, you can type your answer to me privately, and I will record that.
Yeah, that's surprising. I guess you guys. So, but if you're saying it's not on the website, it's not accessible. Those are things you can still request because it's public record. We'll make sure that it's accessible. No, I'll make sure. I want to make sure it's transparent. That's why, you know, when we saw how many people.
So I will end the poll in about 30 seconds.
It's definitely important. They had to completely change their standards to build that. So that would be.
The point is that we want to hear and
I believe
get out there and give us some feedback. You know, it'll show us the plan. So thank you for your time. Appreciate that. Ma'am. So there's, I'm going to show you that, but there's also because there's a QR code right outside. You can press your phone onto it. You know how you do that with the menus? You take the your camera and it'll take you right to it. Otherwise, you can get to it from the county's website. There's a lot of different options. but if you look right outside the door, like on the table, you should be able to hover your phone.
Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and I will show the results just for our online people. So let's see if you guys can see it. We have most people voted for no change in the current code, and we will tally these answers together with the other ones. Okay, so we will continue. And if you saw in the chat, there's some discussion about, how will this affect people moving here, whether or not we build housing may or may not actually deter people or encourage people to move. So just keep that in mind. Where I currently work, we have a lot of housing pressure because people are moving, but we don't have enough units. So it can create a separate challenge. All right, so here is our second one. These are some housing development types. This is not to say what will or won't be allowed in the area. We just want to see what your preferences are. This is specifically for the south part of the county. So think south of Stillwell Road in Ebenezer Creek area. So this is in South County. And let me launch the next poll. Okay, the next poll is available. You can choose all the ones you like. It does not mean these will be there. Just choose the ones that you think might be attractive to have somewhere in South County. Remember, you can make more than one selection. These are specifically only for South County. This is also going to include all of the 3 major cities. We will vote on North County in the next slide.
Well, so partly it's like how do you choose how we want to create a sense. I do think you probably wake up like 4
That ain't the right answer. You want to be hit hit?
Exactly.
Okay, so have about 3 minutes. Oh, my apologies. It seems I was not sharing the screen. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see the screen. Make sure you guys can see it. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Someone sent me a comment, they couldn't see that screen. And I'll give you guys an additional minute if you want to change your answers now that you have seen the photos. My apologies, the screen wasn't showing earlier.
sticky notes so people can write stuff, and I realized I've got my sticky notes. No, well, he was just talking about, I wanted to add a comment of Georgia to the
These images are not hard and set fast plans for the South County. These are just a couple of examples of what it could look like. And you guys have 1 more minute.
I think so, because I would like to see architectural standards, but I don't necessarily prescribe to any of those. So yes, some, but not those.
Okay, so I will show you guys the results. We have many people who enjoy the townhomes and the single-family homes and garden-style apartments and mixed-use development. So that's cool. So it seems like there's a mix of things that people like. Okay, so we'll move to the next poll and the next slide as well. This is going to be for the for the North County. So the North County, vote on what you would like to see in the North. As you can see, there is one change in the options, manufactured homes.
My thought is,
I didn't know we were going to get everything together. I said, just go ahead and do the final slides.
That's so self-care.
because I was going to say, I don't think I'm going to wrangle anybody and kind of wrapped up. So I might just get back on and say,
Well, I sent her a chat that said,
okay,
we're probably not going to get back together. But maybe at the end of the poll, if you want to just...
That's why.
Oh, okay.
Been asked
Okay.
I keep mentioning the website. Most of them have already been on it.
Good.
What's today's living about? Let me know right now. Get on to both.
Yeah, it's up.
So I sent him a little note. I was like, I'm sorry, I had to cut you off. Probably not. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate y'all doing it.
I know exactly.
Good, good. You live it.
I'm living, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was. And you're out of Savannah, and you said you're out of Atlanta?
No, I'm actually in Raleigh.
Okay, Raleigh, okay.
So I'm the local boots on the ground kind of person, and she swoops in and saves it.
Nothing like that.
Okay, I'll give you guys 2 more minutes.
You better save them.
Looks like we have most people.
I know. We'd be millionaires.
We'd all be millionaires.
That's right. Well, and we had a workshop
And to the conversation that's going on in the chat box, as you're voting and considering these things, where certain things are permitted will be another decision that's made, not necessarily something that we will make right here. So right now we're just trying to gather information about what people like with regards to the different parts of the county, or what they could envision being part of the future. Okay.
Well, I've got 85 acres that we purchased behind Rick and Place today.
I will end the poll and show you guys the results. It seems that many people like the single family homes in this area. As you can see here, more of the ranch style homes, manufactured homes and townhomes. Cool. So let's move on to our next one. We have just 3 more. And this is about Highway 21. So if you see the red portion of this slide, this is already marked as a character area in the last comprehensive plan as being the primary commercial corridor. So that's something the county has already determined is where commercial will be. In this question, we want to know, would you prefer commercial services, businesses, whatever, to just be anywhere across this whole entire highway segment? Or would you rather see it concentrated into plazas or centers? So for example, you could have a grocery store here and a clothing store here and a gas station here and a restaurant here. That would be option 1, the possibility of option 1. If we go with option 2, you could have all 4 of those things, maybe 1 center right here or 1 center right here and 1 center right here. So we just want to see what your preferences is. Would you like to see all of the businesses spread more apart from each other, or would you like them to kind of be more of one-stop shop services? So let's launch the poll. You just have 1 option. This one should be a little quicker. Put them anywhere or concentrate them into a few different centers.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And keep in mind that this area has already been designated as a commercial area in many of the land parcels. Whether or not the development is actually there yet, you'd have to refer to the future land use map that probably already allows for those commercial projects to be there. So definitely, if you have some concerns about where the commercial is located, look at the county's future land use map, which shows you where it's going to be allowed, even if nothing is there but trees right now. Looks like we have about half of the people who have answered. And hopefully you can see in the photo, this area is south of Highway 119, so primarily connecting Springfield to Rincon and then going down to the state line towards that direction. So about 30 more seconds. I think I hear someone's microphone. Someone wanting to speak. Okay. All right, so we will end this poll. And it looks like we have about 30% of the people who participated said you can put it anywhere. And the majority said that they would prefer concentrations of centers around the area. So we will definitely share this feedback with the county as we work on planning. All right, so we'll go to number 5, which is a sense of place. So kind of looking at the feel, and this is only for the commercial corridor. So think back to Highway 21. Remember, that's already been marked as a commercial corridor, and it has some commercial on there right now. So we want to know, what kind of layout would you prefer to see? As you can see in suburban, here are the roads. And so you have the stores set very far back from the roads, which means that people who may decide to go walk there, they would have to walk on the sidewalks and then go further back to the stores. And you would see more cars in the very front. So as you can see in the picture on the bottom left, this is kind of what that suburban feel would be: cars in the front, stores in the back. The urban feel does not necessarily mean it's going to be very dense, but it's just more of a feeling, the environment. So that's what we're focusing on here, is that feeling you want to have. Would you like to have the storefronts closer to the main street, more pedestrian focused? There will still be parking. The parking will just be behind the buildings instead. So as you can see in the top right-hand picture, the red represents those main commercial areas. Behind there would be the parking, however they decide to construct the parking. And perhaps there may even be some residential, like more apartment style things behind. So this is just a couple of examples of how it could look. It does not mean that's how it definitely will look. So I've launched the poll, and we just want you to select what feeling you want in the commercial areas only. This is not the residential areas. And both photos are actually taken in more rural areas, the one on the bottom left and the one on the right in the middle. We chose them to kind of help you guys envision what it would look like within your own environment. And this is not really focused on the height of the building or any kind of density. It's just about where you place those buildings, where we place parking. And I'll give you guys about 30 more seconds. Looks like most people have participated. Okay, so I'll show you guys the results. It looks like we had most people chose urban, but it's almost half, to be honest. So we'll see what the final results are once we combine it with the people who are in person at the workshop. Okay. Thank you for sharing, and let's go to our very last one. I'll give you guys a minute before I open the poll. This is, we're wanting to see what kind of architecture types you like and development nodes. Development nodes are commercial areas, so do not worry too much about residential, although some of these may be mixed use developments that have residential and commercial together. We just want to know what kind of architecture you like. What do you think is attractive? This is not about where it's going to be. This is not about density. This is just what kind of buildings do you like? And so I will go ahead and launch the poll in a second. As you can see, there are many options. You can choose all of the options you like. Also, you can choose, let's not have any architectural standards. Let's let buildings look however they want to. So you can choose as many of these as you want. And they are identified by the letter, so you can select all the letters you like.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, you know what? I think there was incredible feedback, and you know, that's all we can ask for is for people to show up and tell us. Well, I appreciate it. Everyone here was, they gave us thoughtful responses, and so that's a helpful thing. Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You guys have about 1 more minute.
But nobody can respond to you. If they were responding, they should have been on.
To all of you online, thank you for your participation. Please provide the remainder of the poll questions, or this question, any of your responses, and please visit our website as you continue to participate in our process, and thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and share the results. It looks like many people liked buildings. D was really popular, E was quite popular, F and G. So as you can see, people have a variety of building types that they like. And Tim, you asked a very good question. I will go ahead and share that link in just 1 second.
Jaleesa, I see there's a question on what's the website, so maybe if you go to the next screen, you can show what, after this poll, you can show where they can provide feedback on the website.
Yes, I will do that. Okay, so let me go ahead and I will open the website for you. And I will also send the link in the chat group as well. So, Tim and everyone else, I've just dropped the link and I'll just share that screen with you really quickly. Here is the website. This is the comprehensive and code project update. We have links to the comprehensive plan and the code of ordinances. Public workshop is right here. And where you can put your input is we can have you add your comments to this project map. Loading a little bit slowly, but on the project map, there are a few different topics. So you can give us comments about land use, housing options, connectivity, parks, open space, green space, recreation, others. So as you can see, people have added comments such as what would be nice to have here. Let's extend the sidewalks all the way to Family Dollar or to the fairgrounds. So feel free to definitely visit this website and just, show us on the map where you think there could be some improvements. You can also show us what you like about certain areas as well. So it doesn't always have to be a suggestion. And of course, you can take our survey. So we have a survey here that'll ask you a little bit about you to see your relationship with Effingham County, why you chose to live here. So that's right here, number 5. What are your concerns with the growth here? So definitely take a moment to add some comments on the map, take our survey. It's really quick. I think it's just about 10 questions, and we would love to get your feedback. And if you have any questions, you can always contact Teresa Concannon. She is the Planning and Zoning Manager at Effingham County, and her information is also on this website. After this workshop, the recording will be uploaded at some point here, so you can watch it again. This is a recording of our first stakeholder workshop that we had in December. So we will upload these documents once everything is available. I will stop sharing my screen. If I can find it. Oh, there we go. Was everyone able to see the? Okay, there we go. All right, so does anyone have any questions that can be answered immediately, just administrative type things? Anything else that you guys would like to ask? And feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, but we only have 3 more minutes left, so. And it seems that everyone is okay. So once again, thank you so much for attending. We really, really appreciate your feedback, and we will have the summaries available for you shortly after the conclusion of this workshop. Thank you all. Have a great night. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
No matter how good
Okay, good. So I'm assuming she's gonna end the meeting right now. Okay. We're done. Okay.
Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Wow, okay, we managed it. This part of it?
So that they weren't doing any good for us, so we said, all right, we can do high classes on class, and we will be. That's why we did it, but trucks, just like under state law, are allowed to use road patrol. And the only truck routes you can use are the state roads, with the exception of Old Dusty Road, or Howard. And so, here's the thing.
Put all my stuff in that,
They're trying to get.
everything in that box.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I didn't expect it. Yeah, I don't know if I did show you this. I did find the site.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about that.